Hello, welcome back to Lady Lovestead Reads. My name is Jessica and this is my January 2023 reading wrap-up. It's later at night here as I'm filming this, so if the lighting isn't like awesome, that would be why. Let's first go through my January reading stats. In January, I read 11 books and a total of 2,927 pages. I read 3 horror, 2 contemporary literary, 1 romance, 3 mystery thriller, and 2 memoir. 3 of the books I read came from my personal library collection, and 6 of them were written by BIPOC authors, which means that 54%, over half of what I read, was written by a BIPOC author. I read 1 middle grade, 2 young adult, and 8 adult. I had 1 5-star rating, 2 4 stars, 5 3 stars, 1 2-star, and 2 DNFs. The oldest book I read was published in 2007, and the newest ones I read were published in 2022. I actually had 4 books that I read that were published in 2022, and everything else was in between the years of 2007 and 2022. One of my biggest goals this year is to get through 10% of my physical TBR, meaning my personal library. I would like to have, by the end of the year, 43% of the books read. So in the month of January, I started with 500 physical books, 261 ebooks. I bought 1 physical book and 1 ebook. So I ended the month with 501 physical books and 262 ebooks. I read 2 of the physical books on my shelf and I read 1 of my ebooks. So at the end of January, I basically had the same percentage read because the books I read were sort of canceled out by the books I bought. So at the end of the month, I had a total of 763 books versus at the beginning of the month, I had 761. At the beginning of the month, I had read 218. At the end of the month, I'd read 221. So at January 1st, the percentage read was 28%, and by February 1st, it was still 28%. I had set the goal at the beginning of the year for 43% read because at the time when I was setting my goals, I had 33% of my books read. But after that, I had this giant book haul and that bumped my percentage down even lower to 28%. So I've got a lot of work to do to get that percentage and that ratio to where I want it to be by the end of the year. Let's go through the books I read. And I'm sorry, Elle is being a butthead here trying to get into my water and he always ends up spilling it and making a mess, so we've got to move him. I'm gonna go through the books in the order that I read them. That's always just the easiest way for me to do this. Horrid by Katrina Leno. This is a YA horror and it was the Full Moon Book Club's pick for actually December. The live show for it wasn't until January, so I read it in the first week of January. I gave this book 4 stars. This is about a girl whose father passes, and so she and her mom move from California to this abandoned house on the East Coast, and these creepy things start happening on in the house that they bought. It's a haunted house story. It's just really creepy and really interesting. It's an unreliable narrator. If you like stories with unreliable narrators, I gave it 4 stars. Front Desk by Kelly Yang. This is a middle grade contemporary story about a young girl and her family who immigrate to the United States from China. They live in California and they run a hotel, and it's just about their lives and the struggles that they face as immigrants. And it's really, really good. This is actually my book club's pick for February, the Middle Grade Appreciation Society. So if you're interested in reading this, we're reading it this month. I'm going to reread it here in February. I gave it 5 stars. Motherthing by Ainsley Hogarth. This was the Midnight Society book club's pick for January, and that is a book club hosted by Elizabeth at Reading Riley. That club focuses on like mystery thrillers and horror. This is an adult horror. and I loved it. This book, I keep thinking about this book over and over again. So it's really not much in terms of a premise, but what this book tackles is so philosophical and so just really, really deep. Like, it was a really deep read, and I feel like the author used a pretty minimalist plot in order to be a vehicle to tackle some of these bigger life ideas and these bigger philosophical debates. It was a really good book, but essentially this is also a haunted house book, and it's about a woman whose husband's mom, so her mother-in-law, unalives herself, and then essentially comes back to haunt them. And her husband's not dealing with the loss very well, and she's having troubles at work. It's a very minimalistic plot, like I said, but really that plot is a vehicle to discuss larger ideas, and the author does it so, so well. Like, this is an immaculately written book with such minute and astute attention to detail. Every little detail is purposeful in this story, and I gave it 4 stars. The reason I got 4 stars and not 5 is because I feel like it dragged out a little bit too long in the middle, but otherwise I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is an adult contemporary romance, and it's about a woman who is a doctor, and her car breaks down on her way home to Minneapolis, and when her car breaks down, this guy rescues her, and he is the mayor of this small town. There's a 10-year age gap between them. She is 10 years older than him, and they have a romance, and they fall in love, and you know how romances work. And overall, I liked this story. Parts of it were really irritating, and I think really what sort of killed it for me was how unrealistic the male was and his small town. So the guy lives in this very small town, and it's depicted as being this super supportive place where everybody loves everybody and supports everybody and comes together in crisis. And then he's just like the absolutely perfect male specimen. Like, he's attentive, he's good looking, he works hard, he listens, he is empathetic, he's nurturing, he's strong but gentle. He's like, you know, everything that a woman would want in a man, and he had absolutely no flaws. And I don't really like that. I like the characters in my romance reads to be a bit broken. So that one got 3 stars for me. The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This is an adult thriller. It's set in Paris. A woman goes to stay with her brother at his apartment in Paris after she has some trouble, and she can't find him. She arrives at his apartment and he's not there, and she spends the rest of the book interviewing his neighbors and people in the neighborhood to try to figure out what happened to him, because she has some suspicions about where he is and what's happened to him. The neighbors and the other people who live in the building are super shady and kind of lead her on this wild goose chase where she's not getting any answers. And it's a multiple POV book, so you do get to hear from the perspective of those neighbors. Twists and turns. It was a good time. I gave it 3 stars. The Soul of a Woman by Isabel Allende. This is an adult nonfiction memoir, and I gave this one 3 stars because this book is sort of fractured in that part of it is Isabel Allende's memoir, but another part of it is her attempting to do this cultural critique. And the cultural critique is not good. It's trash. It is severely outdated, and it just didn't work for me at all. If this book had been only memoir, it probably could have gotten 5 stars because those sections of the book were really well done and I loved them. But the cultural critique was just awful, and it was very much split in half between those two things. So this got a 3 star for me. Stay True by Hua Su. He is a columnist for The New Yorker. And I really think you have to have read The New Yorker to be able to appreciate his autobiography or his memoir, because I read the first 30% and I was bored out of my mind, so I DNF'd it. The Silent Girl by Tess Gerritsen. This is an adult mystery thriller police procedural. It's book 9 in the Rizzolian Isles series, and it's about Maura Isles, who is a forensic pathologist, and Jane Rizzoli, who is a detective, and they solve crimes together. And that's really the gist of this whole series. Each book solves a different crime. In this one, there is a woman who's found dead, thrown off a building in Chinatown, and all of the, the clues and everything lead back to this mass casualty event basically that happened in Chinatown back in like 1998. And everyone involved and all of the clues that they're finding keep leading back to this one event, and so they have to reopen that investigation. That's the gist of this one. I do think that this is one of Tess Gerritsen's weaker books in the series, but it's still really good, and I gave it 3 stars. Wild Girls by Rory Power. This is a YA thriller horror. It's supposed to be a rewrite of The Lord of the Flies by William Golding, like a feminist retelling of it. And I didn't really get that out of it so much as this was kind of like a sci-fi thriller horror about these girls who are on this island, and they're contained there by the government because they've contracted this disease called the tox. And the tox causes their bodies to morph and do weird things, and it also affects the environment that they're in. So like the trees on the island grow extra tall, and the animals get extra ferocious and grow larger and that kind of thing. And government can't really figure out what this tox is or why it's affecting them or a cure, and they're just left there to survive. So it's the story of them and trying to survive this situation. There's a sapphic relationship in it, which was nice, and it was kind of a fun little like adventure story, but ultimately I felt like it was quite empty. It didn't say much about what was actually happening. It was more just like recounting these are the events that occurred. It didn't really go where I wanted it to go in terms of discussing some of these bigger ideas and concepts behind what was happening on this island. So I ended up giving that 2 stars. Then my last book from January was Dark Horses by Susan Mihalik. This is an adult contemporary literary fiction about a young girl whose father is an Olympic equestrian, and she's training to be an Olympic equestrian as well, and she's in this very abusive relationship with her dad. I DNF'd it because to me this story read as trauma porn, and that all of these really terrible things were happening to the characters without a good understanding or exploration of how it made those characters feel, development of the characters. The story felt very voyeuristic and not thoughtful, so I DNF'd it. Those were the books that I read in January. I think my 2 favorite books of the month were Motherthing and Front Desk. Front Desk because it was my only 5-star from January, and Motherthing because I just keep thinking about that book. I keep thinking about it over and over again. What did you read in the month of January that was just like chef's kiss awesome? And also tell me, what was your least favorite book from January? And if you just want to let me know that you are here, go ahead and leave me a ghost. No, we've already done the ghost. Leave me the firework emoji if you just want to let me know you're here to celebrate ringing in the new year and starting off with some great books. And until next time, make sure that you continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!